All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our last and final seventh article edition of the Unemployment Survivor's Guide. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We started out talking about finances, just so you can get everything you needed in place. We talked about getting to make sure that you knew your options with health insurance so you can save some money if you need to, but also make sure you have the best possible coverage. Make sure those agents step up and help you because they're your partners throughout all this. Next, we talked about resumes, building that up so we can, or actually we started talking about personal brands first. And then we started talking about resumes and how to build those up, align those with your values and your skills and your expertise, just to set yourself apart from the millions of people who are going to be out there in the job market here in the next couple weeks. Then we talked about building up your social media profiles, how all those link together. And next, we talked yesterday about networking and the power that's in that. And today we're going to bookend that entire series with Kenny De La Calzada. Did I get that right, Kenny?
You did.
All right. I call him Kenny DLC, so it's so much easier for me. So I might actually just refer to you as Kenny DLC for the rest of this. It's kind of got a little DJ name to it and everything, so I kind of like it. It works for me. But Kenny is a professional recruiter and a account manager that goes back and forth between partnering with different companies that are looking for the right talents to fit their niche, and also going back and forth with potential employees or people that are looking. And he kind of plays a little bit of a matchmaker, but I'm sure he can define that a little bit better. So Kenny, welcome. Thanks for being here with us today, and we're looking forward to what you have dropping pearls of wisdom on us.
Thanks for having me, Travis. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So did I get that right with I'm seeing flashes here. You're in the Houston area. We got a little storm going on, so we're gonna see a little bit of lightning in the background, but don't worry, people, we're inside.
We do.
We're safe. Don't worry about it. So with the intro, when I was kind of talking about your account management and the recruiting sites, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my primary responsibilities within my company is I take care of the business development. So
Okay.
I actually interface with clients directly, both clients that we're prospecting as well as current clients, as well as deal with candidates. So in the staffing industry, we call that a full desk or 360 role. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So you get to see all kinds of sides to it. So
right.
hopefully you're the right guy for us to be here, because the reason we're here talking to you is because we just walked through this whole entire emotional roller coaster of being unemployed, trying to get our act together, trying to put our best foot forward, and now you're the person we're actually trying to get to. So having that 360-degree perspective that you do is going to be really helpful for this conversation, hopefully. So folks, we're going to do the best we can to help you out, because that's I know Kenny for I want to say about 6 months now, and myself, the heart behind this is to really get you guys on the right foot and help you out as much as possible. So
absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace today. And this is, I want to say, day number 29 of quarantine, or I don't even know what day it is anymore.
I have no idea.
I know it's Monday, April 27th for everybody out there in internet land. But for us right now, I don't know what day this is from a quarantine day. But
right.
We've been here for a few weeks now. Tell us what you're seeing right there.
All right. So with the current market, there's a lot of kind of uncertainty. There's a lot of movement, several contractions in different industries. Not one industry is being impacted the same, and even within that industry on a micro level, there are different business units that are getting impacted more than others. So it's a really unique time. Everybody has heard it. This is truly one of those unprecedented times. I came into the staffing industry in 2016. So we were dealing with all of that during that time, kind of watching it. I'm sorry, 2016, 2014.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with kind of another downturn in the oil and gas industry, which didn't really clear up until 2016, 2017. And then here we are we're at pretty much the highest point in our economy as far as job growth
Mm.
And then here you have it. We're in the pandemic. So what I'm seeing is just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of people playing defense,
Okay.
a lot of observation. And I truly think that within that observation piece, a lot of the key players, a lot of the big businesses are taking a look at their business units and figuring
Mm.
out how they could realign and make sure that if this were to happen in the future, they would be less impacted, as well as are they using their resources as efficiently as possible
Right.
during this current moment.
All right. So that sounds like that's happening in the current companies that you're supporting. So my question is, from a recruiter aspect, I took a look today on the job boards. The only thing I see there are things that are being recirculated that was already posted, and they just haven't turned them off yet. There's really not a whole lot of people hiring right now. So from a recruiter perspective, are you currently on vacation?
I'm never on vacation. Even when I'm on vacation, I'm not
Okay.
on vacation.
So what does it look like to be a recruiter right now?
What it looks like to be a recruiter right now is if you have jobs, you're actively trying to cherry pick the best talent that's out there.
Okay.
Everybody's talking. So it's a beautiful time to be a recruiter if you're proactive.
Okay.
So my day-to-day looks like I'm networking with everybody. If I don't have a job open for that skill set, I let them know straightforward, but I want to network and be a resource.
Okay.
Because the fact of the matter is that we're going to get through this. We're going to come into a strong economy and we're going to grow. You got to be ready for it. And if
Right.
you're ready for it, those that took this time and were proactive and did what they needed to do and did what they wish they could have done, during pre-COVID, right?
Right.
Now that you're at home, you have a lot of time to do research, to study, to network.
Mm-hmm.
Those that do that, they're going to be in a really good place when we come out of this.
Okay, so you're saying you're seeing a lot of people playing defense, but that's not really what you want to do, because you want to play offense, I guess, right now, and that's really
Exactly.
getting on the front foot. Don't understand that it's hard time right now. Understand that this is particularly targeted at people who are finding themselves unemployed, and
Mm-hmm.
me, I've been there. And it's not a fun time. And the
Me too.
whole heart behind this is so you don't have to do the same challenges I did. You can learn from the expertise. And I'm so glad you touched on the network perspective, because that network is something that is in place now. And you're staying extremely busy on there. You're finding really good talent through there. You're also talking to other people about potential cross references, probably between different companies and people that you're seeing out there. But for myself as well, I didn't have such a strong network connection when I got laid off the first time. And
Mm-hmm.
so now this entire series has been really pushed by a lot of the my network expertise that's in there. This isn't a Travis show. This is about people in my network, such as yourself, that are stepping up and saying, I want to help too. And so thank you
Right.
for your time for that. So I definitely appreciate that. So I mentioned a minute ago, or when we first brought you on, you're the person that we were trying to get to, right?
Mm-hmm.
As the job seeker. So what kind of stages typically go from we find a role that we're interested in, how do we get to you?
Okay. Good question. So typically, if you find a role and you're not engaged with the recruiter, or possibly a recruiter has posted that job, my first advice would be to contact them directly.
Okay.
Don't feel like you're kind of overstepping boundaries. There are no boundaries, right? This is geared towards those that have been laid off, right?
Mm,
So what do you have to lose at this point besides making a friend?
right.
My best advice is if there's something that you see, one, read through that job description, make sure you're the most placeable candidate, meaning you've worked in that function, you have recent experience working in that function, you're in the industry, just kind of those check boxes, and then reach out, always
Okay.
reach out. There's nothing wrong with being assertive. There is a fine line between assertive and kind of annoyance,
Okay.
but reaching out and being proactive to make that first engagement to say, hey, Mr. Recruiter, my name is Travis, right? I wanted to reach out to you pertaining for this job, ABC job. Do you have time today to speak, or possibly later this week?
Okay.
Set up a phone call like that, or even an email, but they should get back to you fairly quickly. Now, internal recruiters, that's a different story.
Yes, it is.
So internal recruiters, typically they'll get, I don't know, 100 resumes, just throwing out random number there.
Right.
100 resumes, sift through them as best as they can if they're sifting through them themselves, and kind of call out the first 3 or the first 4 that they like, and then not really look at the rest.
Wow.
Okay. I'm speaking very general,
right.
I'm not, saying the whole industry is like that.
Right.
There are really good internal recruiters, but that's typically what happens sometimes.
So you actually are not an internal recruiter. You work for a recruiting agency, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's why you can get that 360 perspective on everything, because you're client facing and you're I want to say customer facing, but it's not. It's actually
candidate facing.
Candidate. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, absolutely. So
good word.
One thing that's really dynamic about my position that I'm in the market is I speak to hiring managers. I interact with all talent acquisition departments, HR, as well as the candidates themselves.
Okay.
So I speak to the internal recruiters. I speak to the manager that's hiring for that position. And I speak to the candidates. So I kind of get a well-rounded picture, just kind of what the life cycle looks like from start to finish.
Nice. That's making me kind of think a little bit here. From in your industry perspective, how many companies, just on average, would you say use recruiting services versus just hiring directly? Is it?
I'd probably say
I know it just depends, but
right. I'd probably say roughly 40%.
Okay, that's even higher than I expected.
Maybe less. I mean, it really. So within my experience, it depends on where the market's at. So let me give you an example. Pre-COVID 2019, were there business units utilizing recruiters? Absolutely. It was probably less than the amount of businesses that were using recruiters in, say, 2016. The reason I say that is because in 2016, we noticed, I'm gonna take one sector of the working class, the blue collar workers, right? Traditionally, they were direct hire or union workers. We saw in 2016, once the ramp up of oil came back, that there was a large demand for contract workers. So essentially, they're working directly through staffing agencies and typically W-2'd through those agencies, but contracted to the end client. So they may work for, Chevron, but really they're a subcontractor to Chevron.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, definitely. Thank you for that. So you mentioned a few different things about the way you work and in general, the way a lot of internal recruiters work. What boundaries should the candidates be looking at trying to get past? There's a few roadblocks that I typically see, and I find whenever I was out there in the job market looking for somebody looking for what I thought was a really good match. I mean, I thought I checked every single box on there. I thought even the values in the company were right for me, and I would submit the resume. I would reach out to the recruiter, nothing happened, or the internal recruiter, nothing would happen there. And then about 3 weeks later, I get a form letter saying, "Hey, we appreciate you, but we've gone with somebody who is more qualified," even though I checked every single box. So I don't understand how that's more qualified. Can you give us a little bit of insight what's like being on the other side of that?
Okay, so typically, just like I had previously mentioned, for some job positions, you may get an influx of 100 resumes. I think the biggest trouble that a lot of individuals are facing in the job market is that their resume doesn't read to the job that they're applying for. So yes, they may have held those functions. Yes, they may have had a position that at their company that is that position, and it's just renamed for another company.
Right.
But you have to really make sure that your resume reads to those responsibilities. So oftentimes, what I tell majority of my candidates is, hey, if you're going to apply in the job market, make sure that you're applying with a set direction. Don't kind of just go out there and shoot your resume everywhere. The law of numbers, the law of average, it doesn't work
Okay.
in that realm. You're going to get a lot of phone calls, but you may not get a lot of traction.
Okay.
And oftentimes it may lead you to a position that really you weren't interested in, but now
Right.
you've done all of this work, which, unfortunately, if it's not strategic, it's kind of all for nothing, right?
Right.
And everybody's situation is different. I get it. It's hard out there right now for everybody. There's no one that's not affected. Even the people that still have jobs that are working, I've been in an unemployment situation. It's not fun.
No.
Even as a recruiter, I found myself at one point unemployed, and I just kind of sat there and thought, like, hey, I'm a recruiter. I know how to do this. Let me navigate myself through these waters. So whenever these individuals get an influx of resumes and it doesn't read how they would need it to read per
Okay.
the job description, typically they're overlooked. And it's not just the candidate side, but it's also the recruiter side. Just in the industry within talent acquisition, we need to do a little bit better in terms of the vetting process. And, that comes down to the internal, as well as if they're utilizing a third-party recruiter, that recruiter to be able to screen candidates properly through their resumes and say, okay, this is a different title, but this is the exact same responsibilities.
Right.
And being able to recognize that quickly, that's just for our industry. We need to do better, right?
Okay. I heard a lot of good things there that I was kind of following and was on my assumption list before.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for calling out some recruiters here, because also I called out some health insurance agents earlier in the series saying, hey, these guys, they work for you. These are
Right.
these are people working for you. You as the insured, you as the client have a complete right to interview that agent and figure out,
Absolutely.
hey, this needs to be a relationship. I'm going to need you at some time. I need somebody that I can mesh with, somebody that I can trust, somebody that I can understand. And so thank you for doing that. I'm also calling people to step up. So I appreciate the ethicalness there. And for everybody out there in interview land, I actually met Kenny on the other side of the table, right? So I was interested in a marketing management position within industrial manufacturing, and that's something that really speaks to my background. And so I got brought into the company that Kenny's with. I talked to the original recruiter, and then I talked to Kenny as the account manager. And I'll be honest, when the original recruiter left, she said, yeah, I'm going to have the account manager come in here. I really didn't know what to expect. Here comes Kenny, sit down, big smile on his face. He's not wearing his glasses because we saw a little bit too much of a glare there for a little while. But he kind of had this Clark Kent thing going on when he sat down, and this gentleman treated me with absolute respect and just wanted to hear what was me, what made up my personal brand, and what I could actually bring to the organization from not only talent and experience, but also from values and things like that. So thank you for treating me with respect, especially being in that kind of a situation where you're actually trying to find your way, find your lane, and stuff like that. So thank you for that. So calling people up to the level that you've said, at least in my mind, that's a good thing.
Hey, I appreciate that. Just to go off of that, at the end of the day, we're all humans.
Indeed.
We need to connect with each other. We need to help each other out. I definitely have been calling out individuals in the staffing industry for years since I joined the industry, because we have such a low barrier to entry, and that's just the facts of it. If you have some sort of customer service acumen, you know how to talk to people, you know how to build a relationship and build rapport, you'll do well in this business. But if you don't follow up, if you don't, figure out how to maximize your candidate pool, you won't do well. Because
Okay.
again, if you don't know what a person's core responsibilities are and how to directly sell those to a business within the same industry, like a competitor business or
Right.
just another business unit, or even a business in another industry where that person's experience is directly translatable, you're going to miss the ball. And a lot of recruiters just try to treat the job market as a revolving door. You can't
Mm.
do that to individuals. I found my best success when I built relationships both on the client and candidate end.
Yeah.
When you go the extra mile, and I think I've called out recruiters and account managers within my industry time and time again to go that extra mile to deliver. It's going to set you apart. So, I appreciate the kind words, but
Mm.
at the same time, that is the standard, at least from my perspective, that
Okay.
we need to be at
All
within
right.
my
Well,
industry.
thank you for holding yourself accountable. I appreciate that too. Um, the next little topic that I want to touch on, it's not really flowing. It feels like it's going to come out of left field, but don't worry about it. So we talked about you're the person we want to get to as the recruiter, as the account manager, the person that's really looking to establish that relationship. Let's take a step back.
Okay.
And before it even gets to the internal recruiter, before it even gets to you, are there typically any types of algorithms or word scanning software that these resumes flow through? Is there things like that we really have to be aware of, make sure we're striking on keywords and buzzwords and things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you'll see this practice with a lot of bigger companies. Search engine optimization is a big thing. You still there?
Okay.
Are we good?
Yeah, I am. You got a little bit
Okay.
jittery there for a second, but I'm sure it's just the storm. We'll be good in a second.
It's a storm. Okay. So
Yeah,
search engine optimization is a big thing that's practiced. The technology is put in place to make the scanning process more efficient. So
Okay.
that way, instead of going through 1,000 resumes in X amount of days, you could kind of highlight the key individuals fairly quickly off of that. So you'll see that there's some individuals that are freelancing and they're soliciting their services to get your resume up to date and make sure it has all the keywords per the type of position that you're aiming for,
Okay.
including the niche industry that you're going for. So that way, when it pops up in an internal system, if let's just say account manager with commercial sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
The recruiter, whether internal or it'll probably be an internal recruiter, they'll look through it and they'll say, oh, okay, account manager, commercial sales, they have it multiple times in their resume. Cool, this is the right person.
Okay.
But the drawback from that technology is that people know that algorithm. People know that they look for keywords. So if they haven't been fully vetted in that function, maybe they worked in conjunction with that function or had those responsibilities put on their table every now and then, but it
Okay.
wasn't their full day-to-day. Once they get to the interview process, I mean, you can't beat human nature, right? It's going to come out. It's going to show. So while is it advantageous to do that? I think it's subjective.
Okay.
It could bring you to
So
the
everything in
hole.
moderation.
Everything in moderation.
Okay.
My best advice: if you didn't do it, don't say you did it.
Okay. And so when it comes to buzzwords, where should we be looking, or these keywords that we're talking about, where should we be looking to really line up those keywords? Is it in job title? Is it in industry? Is it in the expertise? Is it in the skill sets? Where should we really be looking at? Because I've seen job descriptions that feel like they're 10 pages long. They're not, but they feel like they are because there's so much information packed therein. Where should we really be focusing on those?
A lot of it will be focused within your functions, so
Okay.
your responsibilities. So typically how I would read a job description, I would look at what the key responsibilities are and see if that matches up with what I've done.
Okay.
Right. So from anybody that's looking for a position that is searching these job boards, look at let's just take account manager again, just something simple. Look at the responsibilities. If you've held those responsibilities, make sure they read correctly on your resume.
Okay.
Make sure you have quantitative data in there. If you're going towards a sales position, so you could show like, hey, this is my growth. This is what I brought to the table as a sales person. But any position will have those responsibilities. Doesn't matter what the title is. But again, the main point is to make sure that your resume and your responsibilities in your previous role and the roles prior to that read correctly to that, where somebody can scan it and say, okay, yeah, this is the right person.
All right. So you're mentioning quite a bit about roles and responsibilities. Mm-hmm. How much do you look at roles and responsibilities versus accomplishments when you're reading a resume?
I look at, so it depends on the title, at the level of the individual that I'm looking for and what function they are. But I balance them out pretty equally. I do like to see people talk about their accomplishments within their resume. As somebody that looks at resumes every day and has to present them to potential employers, that just makes the job that much easier. If you're good at what you do, you typically come with reference letters, letters of recommendation, as well as some key accomplishments that you could highlight. Now, you don't have to make a whole front page that's just all of your accomplishments, but pick out 2 to 3 at each position and just list it down there. What did you do? Even if it's the simplest thing, like you brought up company morale, that's a huge thing. We're transitioning our work landscape, and culture is huge now. And Absolutely. If you brought up company morale, wow, if everybody went to that company happy, how did that affect the profit? Because I know if I go to work happy, I'm producing. Right. So I'm sure everybody was doing great there. So again, list those out. Don't leave them out. Feel free. Your resume is your own. So take that time to not boast, but let the truth be known. Display your accomplishments as best as you can.
All right. So there's different types of resumes, right? There's the accomplishment style resume that just basically bullets out everything they've ever did. There's the reverse chronological employment resume that reads where you were last and kind of goes back 10 to 15 years, however long you want to do that. Number one, how long do you like to have a resume from your perspective? And number two, what is the best type? And is there different answers for different types of roles?
So to answer that, I have one way that I kind of do things, and it's just I keep it synchronized like that. So I do a resume starting from most previous employer to the furthest, right? Okay. So your most recent employer, and then the previous employer after that, and so on and so forth. I always tell people, if you have a really long work history, go back 10 years. Okay. Past 10 years, it's kind of irrelevant. Now, depending on the position, they may want to see that. Okay. You could add that, but your initial resume, I would say stay within a 10-year mark. Okay.
And so you were referring to the reverse chronological one. A lot of times, me personally, I like to make sure that the people I'm working with, because I do a lot of I don't want to call it charity work, but I do a lot of volunteer efforts for especially friends of mine who find themselves in challenging times, or they're looking to get a different direction. And that's just my marketing mind working out, right? Because I'm really thinking about the target audience and thinking about how to adjust that content to them. So definitely include the hard and soft skills. So make sure that you have the ability to do the job from a personality perspective as well as from a technical perspective. And then also, a lot of people, I've encouraged the introduction and or some accomplishments before the the reverse chronological resume. Do you like to see an introduction or some highlights separate, or do you like to have it in that content?
I don't think it makes a big difference.
Okay.
Personally, if I was to choose, I would like to see highlights within each job, so
Okay.
that way I could piece it together. So if you have, let's just say, 4 jobs on a resume, I want to see what you accomplished per job within that description instead of just listed at the top. That way I could take note on where you did certain things.
Okay. And as they're talking about that,
Excuse me.
Glad I'm not 6 feet within you, right?
It's just allergies, man. I'm terrible right now.
Yeah, my favorite meme during this whole COVID was a guy who had these the floating noodles. He had 6 of them taped to like a sweatband on his forehead, so he had a nice good radius. People couldn't get close to him.
That's funny.
That was probably my favorite one so far. But I'm sorry. I'm not making fun of COVID. This is a serious thing. I apologize.
It is.
It's just it's funny to see some people's reactions sometimes. So I'm gonna go ahead and just ignore that like it never happened, and we'll just keep moving. All right.
All good.
So you touched on what I would agree with, including them more into the roles. I like that approach. You still there? I think I've dropped your camera. There we go. We're good.
There we go. Yep.
There's Keeney DLC back right at you, people. Here we go. So do you like a introduction, or do you like a cover letter, or does it matter to you?
I don't think it matters. Again.
Okay.
My best advice when it comes to a resume, just make sure you have your core responsibilities, your professional work history, your education, your skills, and any additional certifications that would make a difference in your role listed. Other than that, an overview, a professional summary, a cover letter, depending on position, will those make a difference? Absolutely, I think so. But again, for the general person, I don't think you should think too hard into it. Just have those main things.
Okay.
Your professional work history, your education, your certifications that deal with your career, as well as your skills.
So if somebody like myself who looks like they're pretty shallow because they've done so many different things, like I have an IT degree, I have 18 years of business development marketing experience, I have certification in graphic design, I have a certification in project management, and I'm also a licensed insurance agent in the state of Texas, right? So
right.
all these things are, whoa, what is it good to list all of those types of certifications, or only the ones that are applicable to what you're looking for in that particular role?
I would say applicable to that role.
Okay.
That way it shows some growth. Now,
okay.
if you're and take this case by case, right?
Right.
There's some positions where you could go in and put everything that you've done, and put it on there, and it just reads that, hey, this guy's proactive. Right. This guy is everything that you've listed. Let's just use you as an example. Sounds like you're a great marketing guy. You'd do well in the marketing for a large insurance firm.
Thank you. The reason why my background is so diverse is because I'm Mr. Fix-It. I worked for a few different companies for 8-9 years apiece, and I've played a lot of different roles in those organizations, not because, oh, he's not doing this right. It's like, oh, no, we need help over here. We're going to put Travis on it. Right? We're going over here. We're going to put Travis on it. And so I know that there's other people out there like me that have that little challenge. So currently, I think at last count, I probably had 16 different resumes, depending on the different role I was after based on my background and experience. Is that a good approach for people like me, or would you suggest something different?
If you have 16 different job titles that you're currently applying to, I would say have 16 different resumes, so they read to those responsibilities. but I would even cut it down. I'm telling
I pulled that number out of the air. It's not really 16, but
okay,
it was for example.
Well, anybody that
I saw your eyes get a little bit big there. You're like,
yeah.
wow.
Anybody
Okay.
that finds themselves with more than 4 or 5
Okay.
versions of the same resume, you may be casting your net too wide.
Okay.
Again, we're talking very general here.
Yes.
So,
Very.
let me be frank with it. And the reason I say that is because I tell all of my candidates, let's be strategic with this market. Everybody that I've talked to, starting from week 1 of COVID all the way to present day, every consultation that I have with candidates, I start with, hey, do you want to stay in your industry, or are there other industries that you're interested in? And we travel down that conversation. The reason is because I don't want my candidates to cast just a wide net.
Right.
Will it work? It may, but then you might find yourself in a position getting offers from companies or positions that you really didn't want to. And then because of that's what's on the table, you're going to take it. And then what happens? The market gets better. You leave in 6 months. Did you really gain anything in 6 months? Or was it kind of like a step back? Right. So I always tell my candidates, hey, let's be strategic. Let's create a plan. Let's do some homework. You and me. Figure out what works for you. I'll go out and start looking at prospective companies, get an idea of what industries are moving and in what regions. And then let's come back together and let's make a collaborative effort. Let's work together on this thing. Because ultimately, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you just made a really good point there. Regionally, what makes sense? Are you going to see this job market going more to a remote role, so the region isn't as impactful, or is this going to still be, hey, you can work from home more often, but we still have to have some sort of proximity? What do you think is going to happen there?
I touched on it briefly at the beginning of ours.
Yeah.
I definitely believe that we're going to go into a more remote workforce. You're going to see a lot of operations that traditionally were frowned upon working at home that are now 100% home based. And a lot of these big companies, there's been a lot of articles circulating, a lot of studies being found that CEOs are actually reevaluating their bottom line with their employees and saying, hey, if you're getting the same amount of work done from home, what does that look like for me on the budget? That means I don't have to facilitate a big office just to have you there 40 hours a week. It cuts off on insurance, and I think we're going to see that burden cost decrease. So employers are going to say, hey, from a financial standpoint, we could save 3 to 4% just by making X amount or X percentage of our workforce work from home.
Okay.
Because it also, when you work from home, there's no travel time. So that means that salary gets lowered a little bit for those same responsibilities. I also think we're going to see a trend of new emerging technologies, as well as older systems or older platforms take on a new brand or a new maybe a new function to work within this new remote workforce.
Okay.
I really think that's going to be the next landscape within the professional realm that we're going to see and we're going to tackle. So there's going to be a lot of new jobs. There's going to be a lot of jobs that change function. I think there's going to be a lot of technical roles that are going to emerge from all of this as well.
Okay. Very interesting. So a lot of our conversation up to this point has, how do we get to you? Let's talk about when we actually get there. What does the interview process look like? How should a candidate really present themselves during the interview? How should they be speaking? What suggestions, interview tips, I guess you could say, would you give in that front?
I would say whether you're talking to a recruiter, third party, or you're talking to an internal talent acquisition specialist, always treat it with utmost professionalism that you can. Approach every conversation as a professional and just treat it like that. Now, when you're with a third party recruiter, do your homework. Just like Travis mentioned earlier, insurance agents, they need to work for you. Same with recruiters. Make sure that recruiter's working for you and you're not a revolving door in the Rolodex, right? Ask them questions, vet them out, because this is your career, this is your future just as much as it is there. And if they're not working in partnership with you, then it might be the wrong person. Okay. Just being frank.
Okay, understood. So the homework was a really good idea there. So how do you feel as a recruiter when somebody comes in, they were aware of the end customer or your customer, the end employer, and yet they still don't know anything about them when they get there? How do you feel as a recruiter? Do you want to make that conversation as short as possible, or do you give a little bit more grace, or what does that look like?
What do you mean in terms of like
has the candidate actually educated themselves on the end employer if they already knew who that was?
How do I feel about it? I think if they already know about it, they should. If they know the company, awesome. If they don't know about the company, I'm not going to hold it against them.
Okay.
But I definitely think that any company that you're applying to, you should do a little bit of homework to at least know the basics.
Right.
Know the company name, where they're located, what market they're in, those type things.
Okay. Yeah, because I've spoken to some internal recruiters in the past who have been they're insulted when somebody comes in with zero knowledge, even though that they knew who they were going to come and talk to, and they're like, okay, you know what? This isn't even worth a cup of coffee. I just need you to leave.
See, that's different. When you're actually when you're going internal to a company, you should have at least done some homework. At that point, when you're going internal, you got to read the about me, read the mission statement, the core values, understand their business as much as presented on the internet. We have all the tools now, so really it's hard to say, hey, I didn't know much when it's right in front of you. Every time I have a candidate go into an interview, I make sure that they're prepped as much as possible. That's just the right practice to do. Okay. Obviously, it benefits me if my candidate does well, but also I want them to do well.
Right.
I don't want them to go into an interview and then come out defeated and say, hey, I don't know how it went. I want them to feel good and say, hey, I went in there, I read up on the company, I knew who I was meeting with, I looked at their LinkedIn, we had some commonality there, maybe, went to the same high school or from the same region, whatnot. Okay. Things like that. And that also helps out the candidate in that interview process. When you're able to do homework and you know who you're meeting with and you find those commonality points, it's just like any other relationship. Once you have the commonality points, like, okay, we're friends now. It's no longer this, one person across the table type interview. Now it's a conversation amongst buddies, right? So when you're going internal, do your homework. Plain and simple.
like you said before, play offense. Don't just sit back and wait for it to happen. Go out there and find some information. Be prepared. And that's just like what we're doing this entire series. How can we be as prepared as possible? So, okay, along those same lines, when you're in the interview with somebody, you've seen their resume. The resume reads pretty good. You're pretty confident on the skill sets. You even had maybe a referral letter or two that helps that along. Right. So you're pretty confident with their skill sets. What are you now looking for from that particular candidate to make sure that they're a good fit?
I'm looking at just the soft skills.
Okay.
How do they present themselves? How do they answer certain questions? Body language. I'm trying to get to know them as best as I can. You got to understand when we're doing interviews, sometimes it's at max an hour, and you can barely scratch the surface on an individual in an hour. So my process, whenever someone meets with me, I break down those walls, and I don't want it to be, hey, you're interviewing with me. I want it to be that conversation. So we could just be as blunt, as frank as possible. That way I know the real person behind the suit or behind the dress or whatever. Basically, I want to know how someone is as an individual, and that's really what I sell my clients There's a lot of people with the right skills. It all comes down to culture nowadays.
Okay.
So if I could sell that piece to my client and say, hey, this person, he's proactive. He's overachiever. This is how it shows he overachieves. He's dedicated, so on and so forth. If I could just talk about his character or that person's character, it goes that much further.
Great. Really good input. So, want to respect your time.
Yeah.
If you wanted us to take something specific away from this perspective or this conversation and really get the knowledge that we need and the motivation that we need to continue playing offense, what would that suggested be? What would you say?
All right. Travis gave me the permission to get on my soapbox. So here
it is.
Yes. You got
I'm going to sit back and let you do it.
You have to do two things right now. You need to, one, read all of the series of Travis's Unemployment Survival Guide.
Yes, it's an intentional
that's
journey,
number
people.
One.
Yes,
that's number
thank you.
one.
Shameless plug. Thank you, Kenny.
Number two, you need to log into a webinar that I'm going to be on Friday with CSI Stars. You need to check that out. If you can't find it, look on my LinkedIn page, which will be tagged onto this video, and I will post that. And I believe it's a free registration. You need to register before Thursday, and it's a webinar on Friday at 11:30 Central Standard Time.
Time out. I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to tag you in this video. Your profile is going to be there. I want you to come into the comment section and put that plug in there. Just put that invite right in the comment section.
I'm going to do it. And that's what
back on your soapbox.
All right. So all joking aside, really do those two things. But also what you need to do is take this fear, take this scared mindset and just shove it out the door. I get it. If you're laid off right now, you're already laid off. How worse can it get, right? We're already in a bad situation. There's no point to make yourself feel bad or lull in your sorrows. What you need to do right now is network. Get on LinkedIn, make a friend, make an authentic connection. Just put yourself out there, say hello, see how the market is impacting that individual and drum up some rapport. Second to that, take advantage of this free knowledge right now. I don't know how long this lockdown is going to last, but there's a lot of technological and educational resources that are out there for free.
Absolutely.
Typically, we had to pay for, or even at a reduced cost. Invest in yourself. If you only have, X amount of dollars for the next couple of weeks, hey, take some of that and allocate that to education. You will never fail with knowing more. And then last, update your resume. Please, please, please. I've spoken to several people that just did not see this coming, and no one did. We're at a high point of employment. How could you, right? But what did it do? It exposed your inefficiency and it showed your weakness. So stay ready. Update your resume. Make sure it reads well. And if you're having trouble with your resume, reach out to myself. Reach out to a recruiter you trust. Reach out to a family member, a friend, a colleague, whoever, and have them read your resume and tell them, hey, if I was applying for this position, do you think this resume would be suffice? And tell them to be 100% honest, because them saying, yeah, that works, whatever, that's not going to do you any good. You need somebody that's going to tell you the raw and the real, and that's going to help you level up. And if those individuals aren't around you, find the ones that will do that and surround yourself with them and just get ready. Because if you're unemployed right now, you're already at the worst of it. All you have to do is believe in yourself, instill that pride, that dignity, that self-confidence. You've made it X amount of years in this world. You're going to continue to push further, and no one's going to stop you. So those are my tips to get through this COVID-19 pandemic.
All right. Thank you for touching on the building up your personal brand and the resume writing things that just went out last week. All part of the series, people. So like he said, read those. And in the resume one, it was kind of hidden in there a little bit, but there's actually a little link from monster.com, and I'm sure that there's other ones out there, but you can submit your resume for free and they will put it through their algorithm and give you feedback within 2 business days. So if you can't find somebody who's going to legitimately speak to your resume, or that you don't trust, or you want to start somewhere else, this is a great service to look at. Also, just hitting on your point there, sorry, I got on my soapbox a little bit, but it's important. You're inviting the constructive criticism. When they're talking back to you, they're not picking you apart. They're trying to help you. They're trying to build you up. Understand what their perspective is, and try to include that and build you up even better. What they're doing is they got your back. They're not attacking your front. So just keep that in mind as you're opening yourself up here. Understand this is a really hard time. Things are very raw emotionally. I understand that, but just remember, you're asking for this help. Accept it.
Absolutely. Well
All right?
said.
All right. Anything else that you have, Dad?
That's all I got. That's all I got. I appreciate you having me on here and keeping me in mind. You know,
My
you're
pleasure.
doing a great
My pleasure.
job.
Thank you for coming on.